Hello and welcome to another video from the only channel you need to not only survive the current apocalypse but actually enjoy it. And today's little video is going to be about how to fix your ground, because I've had a couple of my viewers tell me they cannot grow fruit trees because all they have is hard pan clay. Well, that's not entirely true. And I would have never said anything, but the last viewer asked me if I had any suggestions or advice. So here we go. Now this is a picture I drew of a tree. If you notice, there's a crown and there's branches and a trunk. These are the parts we always see, but below ground are the roots. And a lot of us probably imagine that the roots look like this, just different branches of roots going out in all different directions. That's kind of true, but for the most part, this is a lot more accurate. What's actually below ground are the roots that get the nutrients, which is these. They just go straight out in all directions. They don't go down. And then you got one root in the center that's called a taproot. If you notice, I've got it hitting into this blue, that's water. The taproot brings nothing into the tree except water. I've dug wells. I know at 2 feet deep you hit water, and sometimes at 15 feet you hit water, and they both taste like the same water. Just taste like water. There ain't nothing in there. A few trace minerals like calcium and iron, but for the most part, no nutrients. All of the nutrients are going to come from these roots that go out in all directions. And if you've ever dug a grave or a ditch, you know that that's where all the roots are, because it is really hard to get through the first 6 inches of the soil, but once you get through that, it's pretty much smooth sailing. These roots are going to take in the nutrients from all the leaf litter, dead branches, dead animals, whatever happens to be on the surface of the ground. It may interest you to know that in North America, the average depth of the topsoil is only about 2 inches, because our nation has been denuded over and over again. But in a rainforest that have been untouched for thousands of years, the topsoil is still only about 1 foot deep, because that's just the way it works. The ground of this planet absolutely dissolves, ingests, and digests every organic thing that hits it. It's the way it works. There's insects down there eating, the trees themselves are eating it, and that never gets much deeper than 1 foot deep. Now, if you're worried about your root, your taproot, getting through your hard clay, there's really only 3 types of thing that you're going to run into below your topsoil. That's sand, clay, and rock. And you've got to admit that hard pan clay is still a lot looser than rock. And a root will break a rock, so it'll have no problem getting through hard pan clay. Where you may have a problem is trying to plant something that don't want to grow where you're at. In the southeast, we're known for very, very acidic soil, but in the Southwest, they're not known for that. So they can have the same rainfall as us, the same temperatures as us, and you still can't grow the same trees as us, because you have to have a tree that will live in your pH. Now, what can you do to fix that top 3 inches? Well, you got to admit it's a lot easier to fix top 2 or 3 inches than it is to fix a 10-foot deep hole to accommodate a tree. But all you really have to do is put things on the surface and keep them there. In other words, if you're on a hill, you're going to have to make some kind of a barrier to keep all those nutrients from washing away. But if you're on very, very flat ground, you can just throw things out there. Some of the things we throw out there when we can is, well, when they're clearing the power lines, they have these companies that go through and cut all those branches down. Sometimes they grind them up, and you can just tell them, hey, if you guys want, you can dump on my property. If their normal dump site is 10 miles away, they'll jump on that opportunity. They may get you to sign a release form. Another thing I do is go down to the city barn and just tell them if they're clearing their ditches out over here to bring the dirt, because all the nutrients that are in the soil are washing out with the rain, and the rain goes in the ditch. One problem you'll have with that is the fact that the ditches are full of soda cans and bottles. So as you're throwing this stuff out on the ground, you're going to be running into broken glass, pieces of plastic, whatever. Deal with it. We destroyed the planet. It's going to be a little bit of work to fix it. Another thing that's going to be in them ditches is washout from lawns, such as Roundup, commercial fertilizer, insecticides, all the chemicals that people put out there, including oil that they change out of their cars. But that's another thing that topsoil can deal with. It can eat that the same way that it eats the dead animals and dead leaf litter. It's not the best solution. It's just your only solution. And if you go down and buy the most expensive potting soil they make, there's still no guarantee that that stuff ain't going to be in there too. So you just got to deal with what you got. And beggars can't be choosers. My wife and I have stopped using cat litter long ago, and we use potting soil for cat litter. When the cat gets done with it, we still have potting soil, only fertilized potting soil. So we can just, that's what we use to pot our trees in. When you see me putting those cuttings and stuff in potting soil, it's usually mixed in with cat litter. My own waste products go into a composting toilet, and we use that as well. I've got dump sites all over my land where I've dumped my composting toilet over the years. When you have a place in your ground that's always holds water after a rain, you can fill that in with the waste from your own body, and a year later plant a fruit tree there and have one of the nicest fruit trees you ever thought of. If you don't think you can grow anything because your land is too hard, look around at your neighbors who have the same exact kind of land and see if they're growing something. If you see a fruit tree in somebody's yard, find out what kind of fruit tree it is and get yourself one. If it'll grow for them, it'll grow for you. Another thing that you'll want to do, if you can, if there's no laws against it, is stop cutting your grass. Some people by law have to have grass, and the grass has to be a certain height. But if you're not restricted by laws like that, simply stop cutting it. The plants that will come into an area that has been denuded are called pioneer plants. And there's good reason for it. They'll go somewhere, start breaking up the soil, and once the soil gets sufficiently broke up and fertilized by the dying litter from those plants, then other plants will come in, and then other ones, and eventually you can have a whole forest. When it gets to the point where it'll sustain trees that are kind of delicate, you can go buy trees and put in there. So and the good thing about it is a lot of the pioneer plants are edible. You'll get things coming up in your yard like purslane, chickweed, dandelions, just all kinds of things that you can eat in an emergency. And then on top of that, you can add the things you want to eat. Well, that's how you fix your soil. You know, animals, plants, they're always working to fix the soil as long as you don't work against them. And as the human, you should take the lead. If you don't want to survive, don't listen to me.